Hello folks, and welcome to the live test of VirtualFly's Yoko flight simulation yoke. Just getting started here. As you can see, I have created a side-by-side scenario. That way it'll allow you to see me utilizing the yoke in real time, as well as being able to see what I'm seeing on the screen. This will give you the ability to gauge just how responsive the yoke is and how the actual aircraft responds to the input that I put into the yoke in real time. So we're just getting set up for our flight here. Doing a flight from Kenai, Alaska down to Homer. These are two airports up in Alaska, very close in proximity. I don't want to conduct a flight that's too long, but just long enough for you to get a full idea of just how responsive the yoke is. Now, one of the things that I need to make sure I do that I actually forgot to do is set up my Trek IR. Let's go ahead and get that going. And let's see here. I need to program a center key. And let's program a pause key. That ought to do it. And for my own benefit, so I can hear the aircraft without any feedback, I'm going to plug in my little trusty earphone here. And we should be just about ready to go. Okay, so just a couple of quick points about my particular setup. My setup, unfortunately, is in my den, therefore it is quite a modest setup. My dream will be my future man cave, where I can literally set up a home cockpit. But unfortunately, as my setup is in my den, I have more of a modest desk. You can see I have the Thrustmaster Warthog here, throttle quadrants here on my right. I have a special laptop tray that I've connected to my desk in order to move the throttle down into a more ideal position. Besides that, you can see that on top of the throttle quadrant here, on top of the yoke, I have a small keyboard, and I also have my iPad. And what this does is, because the yoke itself prevents my actual keyboard from being able to pull out, I have a keyboard on top, and not only that, but my knees also somewhat block the keyboard because my feet are on the rudder pedals. So my knees are a little bit higher than they otherwise would normally be. Besides that, I am able to have quick access to a keyboard. So if you have a yoke, I recommend throwing a keyboard on top. It's much easier to use. If I really want to get fancy, and this is a nice little item here as well, this is a virtual laser keyboard. And so if you don't have a keyboard, or if you want to keep things roughly minimal on top of your desk, you can go with one of these laser keyboard. It projects a nice, perfect keyboard right onto your, right onto the VirtualFly yoke. As a matter of fact, just as a quick demonstration, I'll set it up here, provided there's a battery. And you can't really see it very clearly with the video, but there is actually now a virtual keyboard which allows me to type directly onto the yoke itself. You can kind of see some of the red laser from there. Not using this today, however, because the battery is a little bit low, so I'm using my regular handheld keyboard. I also recommend having an iPad in this position. My reasoning is that, number one, I use remote flight applications, And what makes this useful for me is this allows me to maintain a heads-up position while being able to track my airspeed, my horizontal situation indicator. I have all that information, HSI, all right directly in front of me. That way I can keep my head up, look over the panel, and still be able to have my gauges right in front of me. It's very useful, and it's a setup that I personally recommend. All right, I'm going to go ahead and plop my earpiece back in here. But again, as for the construction of the yoke, I'm a very, very big fan of Thrustmaster's Warthog. It is an incredible product. It's all metal, as well as a throttle quadrant here. And besides that, it's an actual replica of a control system that is in an actual aircraft. Granted, it's a military aircraft, but an aircraft nonetheless. So it is very, very accurate. As opposed to, for example, a lot of the older Cytec controllers like the X52, which are really more or less designed for games and simulation. You can kind of use them for both, but they don't really feel realistic, and besides that, they're mostly plastic. So I'm a huge fan of Thrustmaster because this is a consumer level product that feels like a professional level product, and I have seen it set up in a lot of professional home cockpits as well. So it's something that I highly recommend. Very, 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 very high quality. That said, when I first got the VirtualFly Yoko yoke and I put my hands on it the first time, almost immediately the Thrustmaster felt cheap. And I hate to have to say it that way, but it's absolutely true because the quality of the metal that's used here is much, much higher, and you can feel the difference in the price. Right behind the hand grips here, there are actual grooves where my fingers can fit in. You have trim buttons here, aileron trim, as well as your stabilizer trim here on the left side. Besides that, the actual movement of the yoke itself is very, very realistic. It actually feels like I'm pushing and pulling hydraulics. The further I push, the more it wants to fight me, and I really am having to put a lot of pressure in to pull it. The same, or to push it rather, and the same goes for pulling it. When I'm pulling it back, the more I go, the more it's fighting me, the more it's fighting me, the more it's fighting me. So there's a lot of movement here. A huge degree of movement, as well as left and right. The more you go left, the more resistance you feel, the more resistant, the more resistant, the more resistant. And this is the full range left. And now we'll go right. Now it's fighting me. Come on. And it's fighting. And there's the full range on the right. And it centers perfectly each time. You also have buttons here which you can use for different purposes, such as autopilot. I use mine for the Track IR. As far as autopilot goes, I'm not using an autopilot for this flight. Pretty much I'll be flying most of the flight. But you can assign these two buttons to anything that you want. Other than that, again, it's all metal, very, very high quality construction. And now it's time to get an idea of how it feels. Also, the yoke does come with this little USB device, and on it has the software. And if you're anything like me, you probably like to have your flight controls very, very sensitive. And for me, I like to just barely be able to move the controls and get 100% quick response out of it. Unfortunately, within Flight Simulator, and this is prepared v2.4 or 2.5, I should say. It's 2.4 or 5, I forget. But anyway, in Flight Simulator, the sensitivities are very, very limited, and I have them set to all the way sensitive. But even so, I have to move the controls pretty considerable before I get a response in the simulator. So I do use a registered version of FSUI PC, and with that, I'm able to set an S-curve and additional sensitivities to get even more response out of it. Now, if I find that that's still not enough, with the software that comes on VirtualFly's USB here, I can actually set additional sensitivities outside of Flight Simulator, which give me an even more sensitive range of control. Very nicely done. And again, I just want to point out just how realistic this yoke feels. It fits perfectly in my hands. I can grip it perfectly. Usually when I'm flying, I'm probably using 2 fingers, but I can grip it perfectly, and it just feels so incredibly solid. Very, very solid workmanship. So let's go ahead and get our flight started, and let's see how well she performs. I should also add that the throttle quadrant is actually designed for left-hand configuration. I have it on my right-hand side because this is more of a realistic way to fly. If you're in the left seat, you would have the throttle quadrant on your right. Okay, let's get just a little bit of sound here. And going to adjust for full screen. And I can go ahead and release my track IR. Let's take a look around. Let's get our navigation lights, beacon, and let's go ahead and taxi our way out onto the active. And again, when I'm in a position like this, and this is one of the things that makes having the iPad on top of the yoke so much useful, is there are many cases like this where I need to look up and over the panel where I can barely see my gauges. So when that happens, I can just move my eyes down a bit and see the gauges here on my iPad. So once again, something very helpful and something that I highly recommend. Especially when it comes to taxiing, making sure I could keep her on the center line. Actually, I think that was my turn off there, wasn't it? Let's go ahead and make a quick turn here. I don't fly to Kenai too often, so my familiarization of the airport is not perfect. In fact, we can just go ahead and take off from here. Go ahead and activate strobe lights and landing lights. Here we go. I needed to go to the outer taxi here. I thought I needed to go a little bit further. Going to be dealing with a few thermals today and some moderate crosswinds, which is perfect for testing out the yoke to see how much control I can maintain over the aircraft in difficult flying conditions. Right is clear. Clear on the left. Went clear on the left, and then I went off the taxiway. Horrible taxi job there. Alright, let's get in position and start getting a feel for the yoke. So I do have the trim set up on both of the two levers here. Here I have my directional trim here, and here I have my stabilizer trim here. So ailerons here on the right, stabilizer on the left, either up or down. Which is my elevator, and of course if I need to, I can use the rotor trim, which is on the panel within the virtual cockpit. Can already feel the wind starting to push me a little bit to the left. I'm going to go ahead and rotate. Very, very minimal inputs on the yoke, and I have complete control of the aircraft. Keeping my inputs on the yoke very, very slight. Very sensitive and very realistic in how it feels. One of the issues that I had with the old SciTech yoke that I had previously before I donated it is it had sort of a center dead zone, which meant that I had to move the yoke considerably in either the left or right direction in order for the flight simulator to get a response. And this was very, very difficult for me to fly. I like to just barely touch it and get a response. And unfortunately, with that particular product, I just could not get a response by barely touching it. I like to move my controls as little as possible, keeping my inputs as subtle as possible. VirtualFly's Yoko yoke allows me to do this perfectly. Going to take us right up to the ceiling below the clouds here, but stay in visual. And we're going to try a couple of stalls, get a full feel of the range of the yoke. Very, very minor inputs. You can see on your left and right hand screens as I move the yoke. The virtual yoke here in the virtual cockpit moves just as I do. Very sensitive and very minimal on the inputs as well. And we're going to do some tests with the elevator and aileron trims as well. we've sort of moved into the thermals a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and fool around with the elevator trim here. Gonna take hands off and just pull the trim back. Now the aircraft is trimming backward, and I'll trim down a bit. Trimming back again. Now you can see the aircraft is trimming out. Let's go ahead and fool with the ailerons a bit. I can tell by looking at the horizontal situation indicator, the aircraft seems to lean a little bit to the left. It's leaning a bit to the right now as we sort of push through these thermals. Actually, it's really leaning to the right now. So let's go ahead and try a little left aileron trim here. Won't be able to trim it out perfectly as I'm pushing through these thermals. There we go. And she's trying to keep on course here, but the thermals are blowing us around a little bit here. And let's go ahead and push all the way back and try a stall. That was a nice little spin there. And let's try pushing throttle all the way forward. The further forward I push it, the more it wants to fight. The further back I push, the more it wants to fight. The more to the left I try to go, and the more to the right. Oh. It's going to be a rare occasion that you would ever have to move the yoke through its full axis. But just like any real yoke, the further you go, the more resistance you encounter. And the further I push it, the further it wants to fight. Oh. The resistance is really, really remarkable in this product. I've tried a few yokes in the past, and I haven't felt anything that fights me as hard as this does. I mean, you really have to put a little elbow grease into getting the control when you force it to the edges of the axis. Very responsive. And the thing as well about the Yoko yoke is It's actually more responsive than my Thrustmaster Warthog. Let's trim back a bit. Another thing I should mention is the yoke is very, very quiet. I have a high-end microphone here. You can certainly hear my voice as far away from the microphone than I am. The yoke is much closer to the microphone than I am. And you'll notice there is no noise at all coming from the yoke. The rudder pedals you can hear. It's right rudder, left rudder. You can really hear the rudder pedals, but you can't hear the yoke. It is very quiet. And I like quiet. I don't like a lot of noise. The system is water cooled. I don't have to hear the fans. So typically when I'm flying, all I hear is the sound of the engine coming from my speakers. And the feeling of the butt kicker under my chair giving me the vibrations of the flight. Here we'll take a look at the left aileron. You can see the movement. Very responsive. And really, you don't need any more than 2 fingers to keep control. That's just how sensitive it is, and that's just how responsive it is. I'm going to start getting ready for the approach. Again, everything is just incredibly smooth. Getting ready for the approach. And there's Homer off to our left and the spit straight ahead. As you can see, all I have to do is barely move the yoke and I have complete control. I have a slight crosswind coming out of the northeast, so it's going to try to blow me off the center to the right slightly. Note the very, very minimal inputs on the yoke. So the aircraft handles itself, or rather the yoke handles the aircraft quite well, but then again, this is a very small aircraft. So stay tuned for the next video, where we will try a larger aircraft such as the default Boeing 737 and see just how well the yoke handles with a much faster aircraft. Alright, so we're back again. This time we're in a significantly larger aircraft. This is the default Boeing 737. A very simple to use aircraft, which will give us an idea of how well the yoke performs with larger aircraft. Once again, I've set up some moderate weather with thermals and crosswinds. I'll admit over the years I've become so accustomed to using flight sticks that getting used to using a yoke it's a completely different feel. You think it's the same, but it's actually quite different in how it feels. And I just can't stress enough how good the quality is. It feels very realistic. Alright, clear on the right, clear on the left. We'll do a quick takeoff and climb, and then we'll turn around and come back and land. Very short and sweet. There are no passengers on today's flight, so we'll be getting airborne rather quickly. Pretty much like the Cessna, the inputs are about the same. Very minimal. Again, as you can see, the inputs to the yoke are very, very minimal.
$2,500. $1,000.
There's our crosswind starting to come in a little bit.
$500.
A little bit lower than I want to be.
400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10. Minimums. Minimums.
Speed brakes. Oh, what's this guy doing? Little off center here. And flaps up. Spoilers down. It should give you an overall impression of the movements of the yoke on the final approach. Even with the slight crosswind that I had there, again, the movements are very easy. There's not a whole lot of jerky movement. And again, the more you go, the more it resists, the more you try to push towards its axis. It wants to fight you back in each direction. So you're really fighting that tension. And the further you go, the more the tension wants to fight you back. So you really more or less stay out of that tension when you're in a very, very small range of axis with the yoke. Again, very, very realistic feel for this product.